Hi, good afternoon. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Christian. Good, thank you. How are you?
Really well. Great to see you, Nicole. And good afternoon, everybody joining us for another SportWorks Talks. Great to have you with us. Great that you could join us. And from wherever you are in the world, whether it's good evening or good morning, thank you for joining us. I see a few people popping in. Please let us know where you are from in the chat. As it's always nice to see where people are joining from. So a really great week to be hosting Nicole this afternoon, and really looking forward to her presentation. And I want to say thank you everybody for joining us. Little house rules, we'll do about a 20-minute presentation, and then we will be then doing a 20 minutes Q&A at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to hand over and pass on for the presentation. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Christian. So, hi guys, really good to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, SportsWorks, and a great opportunity for the next 20 minutes to talk about going beyond on-pitch success. So talking about fan engagement here. And actually this title of this webinar is a title of a research project that I did when I was studying for my master's, going back to 2011, 2013. So it's something that I did a while ago. I want to share with you some of my research findings, but also I actually revisited it earlier on in April, where I had then a specific look on women's football and the opportunity there. So to begin with, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my football journey, because I always think it's interesting when you hear from different people within the industries how they've got into working, into football, and particularly actually for a female, because it's not the easiest thing to get into. So for me, playing was always my thing. So I played football from a very, very young age. Always wanted to be a professional footballer, but unfortunately, it was never really a viable career option for somebody my age when women's football wasn't particularly big or certainly professional at that time. But the club that I spent the most amount of time playing with was Wolverhampton Wanderers, and actually I kind of went down the coaching route once I'd finished my footballing career, if you like, injuries and what have you. Went into the coaching side of things, spent a bit of times in the States, and I came really to a bit of a kind of crossroads as to whether I went down the coaching route more, or whether I go actually into the more business and commercial side. And I was always very interested in business. In my undergrad degree, I'd spent a year living in Germany, working in an international business there, and also playing football. And I'd really experienced a different football culture over there. And so that was something that I was very passionate about. So I decided to come back to the UK, moved to London, started working at Kantar Sport, which is a sports research agency. And also then started doing a part-time master's at Birkbeck University in sport management and football business. And over the 3 years that I was at Kantar, 2 years at Birkbeck, I really got to grips with having applied experience and knowledge in the industry, but also the theoretical kind of background. And at Kantar, we were working lots and lots with brands, supporting on customer insight for brands that were working within sport and prospective sponsors within sport, and also looking at audience measurements. So there was a lot of work and research done into understanding the audience of whatever sport that we were working on. I then moved into the EFL, and worked for them. That's the Championship, League One and League Two, 72 clubs. And 3 years at the EFL saw me being involved in lots of different research projects, specifically really on a kind of marketing basis, and also a fan experience side. So this is really when I started working with a great company called the Fan Experience Company, and still do lots of work with them now. And I'll talk about them as I go through the presentation. But really at the EFL, one of the big things that I worked on was creating a fan data strategy and putting into place a sort of mechanism to understand the fans better. That was from a club perspective, but also from an EFL perspective. I then moved to Tottenham Hotspur, working in their women's team. So that was my foot in the door in the women's game. I always wanted to work within women's football. And that allowed me the opportunity to become general manager of Tottenham Hotspur Women. When I started in 2017, they were in the third tier of women's football, so completely amateur, just moving into semi-professional. and are now, of course, in the Women's Super League, being fully professional. And a year ago, as they got promoted, I actually decided to create my own consultancy, my own agency, where I focus on consulting to different organisations and rights holders and clubs within women's football, lecturing, and also representing female players and coaches. And I'm also a co-founder of Grow Sport, and we are a partner to the Fan Experience company. So that's my brief football journey. And as I mentioned before, I did a dissertation as part of my degree at Birkbeck that all was focused around going beyond on-pitch success and fan engagement. So just want to talk a little bit here about my sort of research findings back here in 2013. And this was all focused on men's football. So this isn't in terms of the women's football at the moment. But in terms of the men's clubs, some of the key research findings that I had from this, and speaking to different people that worked within the clubs, from technical directors to senior leadership to those working within social media, a real variety of people working at football clubs. And what I actually found was that majority of these clubs had a very sort of short-term strategy and a growth strategy that was very much based on winning. It was about winning trophies, winning promotions that would then enable them to get to the next step and develop their club and grow their club, instead of actually looking at what their growth plan was in terms of their customers, which of course what we label fans within football. And when I thought about, you know, how other companies in different sectors would look at their growth strategies, the customer was always very centric. You know, the customer was really at the core of their plan and their growth strategy. And often a CRM, a customer relationship management philosophy, was instilled within that organization. And I was surprised to find that didn't really happen in football clubs. In football clubs, it was still very much about a strategy based on winning and not so much on fans or engaging with the fans. And so my research really started to argue that actually for sustainable, profitable businesses, which of course football clubs now are, they needed to start looking at CRM, or fan relationship management, FRM, which is now called, and really trying to build a philosophy of that and a culture of that throughout the club that improves their understanding of fans, builds better insight on fans, builds loyalty and advocacy to the brand that is the football club. And of course, that will then lead to bigger profits and long-term growth. Top left-hand corner there, Peter Drucker, who has written many books and had many quotes around management theory, and is someone that was a huge part of my my dissertation when I was at Birkbeck, because he talked about marketing, and he really put the customer again at the center of every single marketing strategy of any business. He talked about the aim of marketing being about knowing and understanding the customer so well that the product or service fits them and sells itself. He also talked about marketing and innovation, and that essentially those are the two key things that every business needs. And we talk here a bit about innovation, and for me, a key thing when I look at where football is at this moment in time, and potentially why we sometimes think of football as being a little bit not quite as kind of modern or forward thinking as some other industries, is actually around kind of diversity of thought, and looking at the diversity of leadership, people within football clubs, within rights holders, within broadcasters and partners. Actually, because of the kind of lack of diversity that we do have within football, I mean, the picture there from the Telegraph, which was a fairly recent article, where just 5 black women among 415 leading sports board members, that lack of diversity has arguably led to a lack of innovation within football. And here is an opportunity now to create more diversity, to generate higher innovation revenue. So this is something that I definitely found when I was doing my research, that a lack of diversity amongst those decision makers at football clubs and at that board level actually led to, you know, the same decisions being met by the same people for the same people, and actually not really understanding the audience and the fans and who those customers really were. And that sort of brings us on to that topic around, you know, are we fans or are we customers? And I've always been a huge football fan. I mean, that's why I wanted to do this research, is because I've been a football fan from the first moments that I could remember. And for me, really, I always considered myself a fan, and I'd heard lots of different fans talk about, we're not customers, why are our club treating us like customers? And it actually got me to thinking, when I'd had lots of experience of working within brands in different industries, why was that such a bad thing to be labeled a customer? And of course, it really it starts to sort of reduce what is actually this emotional bond that we have with our football club as a fan to more of a transactional relationship. And it starts to suggest potentially that as a customer, we are just somebody that the football club sells to, and it's all about sales. But actually, when we look at those best businesses in other industries, that's being customer centric is not just about sales. It's very much about customer service. It's about the analysis and the insight to provide a better customer experience. Surely that's a good thing. And it really is, at the moment, the right time for football to start to develop more of a philosophy around treating fans like customers, referring to them as fans, of course, but actually building customer journeys and customer profiles in order to develop and provide a much better experience to these fans. And this here is a brand funnel that often was used when I was working actually at Kantar and working with the different sponsors within sports, where they would look at every single touch point that a customer would be aware of their brand, be familiar with their brand consideration, whether they would actually then consider using the brand, and what was the moment that made them change that to being a purchaser, and what was then the moment that changed them from being just a one-off purchase to being then a loyal customer that would always go back. And we need to think about that as well if we're a football club. And what's really key for any industry, any brand, is about providing them with a highly valuable experience at all these different touch points along the whole customer journey that they go through to purchase or consider the product or service that they're going to be buying. And within football, that's something that we need to do better at. It's something that if fans were treated and regarded a bit more as valued customers, that we would actually have a better experience either at match day or even on the website when we go and buy a ticket, or even on a post-match follow-up. I'm a customer of Vodafone. I can't have a call with Vodafone without 5 minutes later them sending me text messages wanting to know how I felt about the experience and the call that I'd just had with a member of Vodafone staff. Do we get that when we go to a football match? I certainly don't, and I've had lots of experience from working across fan experience where there's not a huge amount of post-game follow-up to really understand what was great about the experience, what wasn't so great. And of course, we need that information to be able to generate loyalty and provide the best experience. When I was talking about my dissertation and across my career so far, the term fan engagement is used so much now. It's a bit of a buzzword, and I think it was important that I defined what I really mean by fan engagement. And this was something that was very clear when I started working with the fan experience company, in that the way that fan engagement was defined from in their eyes was that we recognized that fans had a deep love for their club, and the engagement part is about when that deep love is actually reciprocated from the club, and that love that's reciprocated increases a supporter's emotional loyalty to the club. And of course, that loyalty from the fans is absolutely paramount to survival. And we're seeing that right now, where we've had a period where fans are unable to go to matches. And of course, clubs are starting to prepare for when they can start to bring fans back to the games, back to the match day. But actually, we can't just go back to what it was before. There are lots of different variables and going to be lots of different situations where potentially certain fans are not going to be able to come back. But also, are they actually going to perceive that experience as being valuable when money is much tighter, things are much stretched? We need to ensure that experience is going to be of perceived value enough for them to come back and be a retained fan. And this is something, this engagement model that I kind of wrote in my report in April, where I really kind of just looked at what the process, a basic model could be for a club to think about engaging with their fans. That's that initial engagement, that initial touch point. The definition really being about researching and building insight into the fan, into that customer, building a customer segmentation and a profile. How do they like to be communicated to? When do they like to be communicated to? All of that information, thanks to technology, can now really be understood and be evaluated constantly. Building that connection, and often that should mean a really magic moment that is provided from the club, be that on a match day or a way of engaging and building a special connection through social media. There's plenty of ways to do that now. Monetization, of course, clubs are businesses, they need to generate revenues, and it shouldn't just be considered around a ticket purchase. There's lots of secondary spend that clubs can start to work with their customers, their fans, to actually be able to offer them different ways of building revenue. And of course, loyalty being that key word to ensure that these fans are not just a one-off purchaser, they're not just coming for a one-off game, but actually you're building them from being a casual fan to more of a core loyal fan that wants to actually move from a membership structure to a season ticket structure, or maybe they go to 5 games a season to 10 games a season, and they buy the shirt at the beginning of every season as well. All those different ways where you can increase revenues. And of course, the business case for fan engagement is very clear. It's the same as if you were talking to any business, any brand in any sector about understanding their customer retention strategy. And as we saw on a previous slide, it costs more money to bring in a new fan or a new customer as opposed to retaining 5 of your current customers. So it's much more beneficial and from a business case scenario to ensure that you have proper procedures and processes in place and a strategy to actually develop fan retention. Of course, being able to actually generate new fans as well, and women's football has a particular opportunity here, which I come on to in a moment. Recommendations, so word of mouth, being able to provide a great engagement and experience for fans and on your match day, or the way that you're spoken to through social media or any kind of digital media, is going to provide word of mouth recommendation, which will lead to attendance growth. And of course, also sponsorship, who want to be involved with clubs that have increased attendances with a great experience that they can get involved with. And all of this leads to sustainable growth, which means that you're less reliant on that winning factor. And of course, winning is only available to a select few clubs every season. And if actually we were all football fans just so that we could win, we would all support the same teams, and we would all jump from different teams to one another. We actually know that fandom is about being engaged. It's about building that emotional connection and that identity. Fan relationship management is now obviously the football version of customer relationship management, and we've seen lots of progress since I did my dissertation in 2013, where actually we're now seeing clubs, particularly those at the top end of the Premier League, having members of staff dedicated to fan relationship management. So you'll have FRM managers, FRM executives that are working alongside these organizations to develop a fan relationship management strategy. And this diagram here really is a process, particularly that we used at the Football League when I was there, in order to collect data on the fans, to ensure that we could profile and segment them. Every single time we ran an e-campaign or any kind of communication, we would constantly analyze those results and learn about how that fan engaged with that particular campaign, so that we could learn what they wanted to receive next time, what was the right channel for them, what was the right time, and what was the right message. Key core aspect of marketing. So this is a real simple process that clubs can start to adapt in order to build their knowledge and their data around their fans. And of course, those strategies really are key for providing business critical insight for sponsors and partners. Sponsors and partners want to know how they can engage in a two-way conversation with your fans, with your customers. They need to know why your customers as a football club are the right brand fit for their company. And so the more data and the more information that we know about our fans, the more that we've engaged with them, it's going to generate better results and revenues for your sponsors and partners, which of course will also generate more investment and more revenues for you as a club. And coming on really just to kind of women's football, having outlined those opportunities there around fan engagement and fan experience, and that growth strategy being critical to having fans right at the core of that. I believe that women's football is perfectly positioned at the moment to make the most of this opportunity that we found ourselves in, really, with COVID-19. Because before that, of course, women's football was on a huge trajectory of growth. Momentum was building, and that was fantastic. And there's been lots of reports about potentially how, this is going to be an existent crisis to women's football. But actually, I think this is a huge opportunity, and it's a great chance for women's football clubs, if they get this right and build these long-term strategies based on fans, provide a unique match day experience. It's not just about a reset. It's not just about surviving this. It's actually about thriving from this. And of course, return of fans as well might actually lend itself better to being women's football first. So let's say maybe it's less than 1,000 or maybe less than 2,000 fans coming to the games. If we can do that in a safe way and fans can come back to women's football earlier than they could the men's game, there's huge opportunities there for women's football clubs to win new fans, and of course then start that engagement model that I previously talked about. And for me, it's those clubs that are taking the opportunity to develop those stronger, deeper engagements with their fans that will see better commercial opportunities. Happy fans come back to those games. Happy fans will tell their friends, they will recommend, and sponsors are always wanting to activate around the experience. So there needs to be a key focus on experience. And the FA, with their game plan for growth strategy, which was from 2017 to 2020, they had three main goals. And as you can see here, this is a few weeks ago, they reported that they'd achieved every goal. And the FA have done a fantastic job in growing women's football in England. But one of the areas that I think is important to highlight is actually that goal number 2, the doubling of fans. And they talk there about their target in 2020 being just over 2,000 as a WSL average attendance, and actually what they have met is just over 3,000. But we need to be aware that that attendance there, the average attendance, does include some high attendances from games that were played at parent clubs' grounds. So, for example, the North London Derby in November had the WSL the record as 38,000. We had 31,000 at the Etihad for Manchester City against Manchester United. There was also West Ham United against Spurs in the London Stadium, Chelsea v Spurs at Stamford Bridge. There was also Everton and Liverpool v Everton at their main stadiums as well, which of course brought in 25, 30, 38,000 people to really build that average. Actually, in the year 2 report, so just a year ago, the FA reported that the game plan for growth showed an average attendance at 937. So it really showed that there was a long way to go in terms of growing of attendance. So we need to be aware of that data. And also an issue just generally around women's football is a lack of data and some inaccuracies of reporting of attendances, largely due to some of the facilities, potentially more in the women's championship games than the WSL. However, these things are what we need to really consider. And as a result, that's why I believe that the experience is so key to driving that attendance growth. We know from previous work through the Fan Experience Company that the higher the match day engagement score, which is the orange line in that graph, the higher the average attendance. We also know from work that we did at the Football League that family and junior attendance is up 37% from last year, and actually overall attendances have reached record levels in line with 1950s, and that's because the EFL have been working for many, many years with the Fan Experience Company to really ensure that the clubs provide a fantastic experience for families, for juniors, for women, for away fans, all at the games, and getting the clubs to actually understand the different segments of their customer profiles. When we look at the fan experience, we look at these key touch points for growth, and we've split them into 5 different categories, largely because if you think of even any kind of brand in any other industry, they will always look at the customer journey. They'll look at every single touch point to take them along that brand funnel to ensure that they become a repeat purchaser and a repeat customer for their business. And we should be treating this no differently in football. So the 5 different categories here really kind of measures the customer journey that we go through. And of course, these different touch points, from club merchandise, halftime entertainment, social media, all part of a customer journey, as we can see here. So from going onto the website to fact find information, maybe then deciding you're going to buy a ticket. What's the experience like when you've actually gone to purchase that ticket? Is it easy? Can you collect your ticket from the stadium, or is it going to be posted to you? When's it going to be posted? Who can I contact when I'm there? For a new fan coming to a women's football match, it can be potentially quite daunting, particularly if you're a family. So the more information that clubs can provide to their fan bases about what to expect on a match day, the better. Social media, obviously, is a really key and an important way now of engaging and communicating and encouraging a two-way conversation with fan and club. The stadium vicinity, the retail opportunities and refreshments, and of course, then what's actually inside the stadium? How can it engage you? Not forgetting then post the match and your exit and the follow-up. Are you then contacted again by the club to really understand how you felt the game was? Did you enjoy the game? Did you enjoy the food? Notice that everything here is all around the 90 minutes. It's not about what happens on the pitch and the win. Of course, it's a factor for enjoyment. There's no denying that. But there are so many other areas that clubs need to be aware of and consider as part of their fan base growth. And looking here at the touch point performance for this season, obviously up until the season had to end prematurely because of COVID, but looking at the Women's Super League and the Women's Championship in England across those 5 different categories, we can see here that there's areas, space for improvement across all 5 categories, but particularly in the areas of entertainment and communication. That's really key. And there's some really basic, simple ideas that can help clubs to improve in those sorts of areas. And I'm just going to talk through a couple of these, but there really are hundreds of different examples of things that clubs have done that are absolutely fantastic from our experience of working with them. But here we start on the bottom left. I mean, this is just a screenshot from Chelsea Women's website where it's really, really clearly set out. If you are new to a game, you've never been to a game at Kingsmeadow before, you know exactly where to click and where you can find information on what to expect if you're a new fan and you're new to a game. You also know how to find information about ticket information. There's a fan panel available as well, and becoming a mascot, which is a fantastic way of engaging families and junior fans. In the top left there, we have the junior reporter scheme that we did at Tottenham when I was there. So it was a great way of actually giving experience, a sort of magic moment for one of these young fans to be able to interview the manager and players at the end of the game and really kind of experience what it's like to be part of an operational matchday staff. In the middle there is a picture of Lewes FC, where they actually have beach huts around their stadium at one end of the pitch towards the goal, where they sell Prosecco. They do lots of different sort of VIP hospitality packages within these beach huts, which is a fantastic and different way of going about it. They also have a brass band, which is the image there at the bottom, which provides a great experience and entertainment. And Lewes and Durham there with the picture of the mascot always do feature very highly on the rankings across all clubs in the WSL and the Women's Championship around their matchday experience, which is why their average attendance is always really strong, despite how they perform on the pitch, which, it's not led by their winning performances, for example. And this is what I think probably my favourite example from Durham women, who have been fantastic for many years in what they do for fan engagement and experience. This here, they provide a matchday calculator online, which is a really quick and easy way to just show fans what they can expect to spend, what it's like for being a family to come and buy here, what food can they expect, what type of merchandise is available, and how to get to the game. Something really, really simple, but it instantly makes you feel welcome. It makes you feel valued as a fan, which is, of course, key to building loyalty. So just to end up there, really just talking about those key considerations from the research and the work that I've done over the last 10, 11 years, is that it's always about going beyond the 90 minutes. Okay, we know now that it's not just, fans don't just go for the 90 minutes of football. It's about everything else beyond that. So it's not just about winning, and clubs need to build their growth strategies based on fans and their customers, not purely on winning. Provide that value. So it's the experience that actually determines if they come back again. Okay, make sure that experience of them coming on a match day is the best it possibly can be. And dialogue with fans is absolutely crucial. So the pre and the post game communication, which is majority of the time lacking, whether that's in men's football and women's football, that is across the board. There's a lack of kind of communication back to the fans, surveying, or even just a thank you follow-up to say, thank you for coming to this game. We really hope you enjoyed it. Here's an opportunity to buy a ticket for the next game. Really basic opportunities to promote your next fixture. Key thing is getting the fan's perspective. Ensure that you know how the fan feels about your experience, and there's no better way of doing that through an audit and really understanding how a fan feels and what they experience when they come to your match day. And I really believe that the experience has never been so important as it is now, because with the fans coming back to football, you know, there is no better time right now that when they've been away, we've realized really quite how important fans are to the game. There's no better time to renew that focus on where the fans should sit at the center of our growth strategies as football clubs and as businesses. That's essentially what we've got to remember that we are. And I think with women's football, the opportunity there to grow, clubs, whether you're an independent club that is not linked to a men's club, or whether you are a club that is linked to a men's club, you all have your unique properties, your USPs, that you can generate a really special match day experience for your fans. So get to know your fans and really understand what it is that they want from their match day, and provide that great experience. So that's the end of my presentation, guys. Thank you very much, and now I welcome any questions for you.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. I've actually got a list of notes that I've made as I've been watching this. So many great points and so many important points that it's so easy to forget when we're delivering sport as a business. And I really want to say thank you for the reminders that you've given us all today, and probably some great learning points for many people on the presentation today. One question that comes to mind, and before I jump into the chat and the questions that are coming up, what's been the biggest resistance, do you think, to the naming difference? We talked a little bit about it before, and you mentioned in your presentation about the difference between a fan and a customer. They're one and the same, but what do you see as the resistance? Because obviously it impacts not just football but other sports, because there is that sensitivity to not wanting to oversell to your fans. So I'm just curious from your experience and research, what your insights might have on that.
Yeah, I think really that resistance comes from the fan itself. You know, being called a customer suddenly takes away any of that kind of emotional connection and potentially how you feel valued by the club, no matter what sport it is. So right. It instantly gives that impression that it's all about sales. And I think actually what we need to do is have that mind shift to talking about customers is not just about sales. You know, customers is about insight. It's about the analysis around that. It's about marketing. It's about finance. It's about all these different areas. And so the customer service and the customer experience for different organizations in different sectors is absolutely crucial, and sales is just one part of that. Whereas potentially in sport, we kind of think of customers as being just purely someone that we sell to, whereas actually we need to have that mind shift and a change of philosophy to say, no, actually, you know, if we treat them like customers, yes, let's call them fans. And of course, we know that there are key emotional and differences and connections between sport and other industries, but actually what would be stopping us from treating them like customers and actually, you know, rewarding people for their loyalty? That's what it's about. And if you go into different organizations, Vodafone, etc., that I mentioned, you're generally rewarded for your loyalty, whereas you could be a season ticket holder at a football club for 30-40 years and they still may refer to you in an email as dear season ticket holder. And you know, we can do better than that.
Yeah. And I think as you're saying, that the value, it's the value add that we add to a customer, and I think that's one of the really important things. I'm a big fan of looking at customer-centered growth and how to treat the customer, but it is about the value add, and there is that fear of selling is a bad word. Nobody wants to be sold to. So we don't want to be, walk into a site. I don't want to be sold something. I want to actually go and purchase and make a decision. So it is that shifting mindset to making sure that the customer's engaged. Really good point. So a couple of questions come in on the chat. Thanks here from Rena. Thanks for your chat, for your question. Thank you for amazing presentation. I agree. I would like to ask you if there is any difference between the fans of women's football fan and the majority of men's football fans, gender, ages, family or couple, so on. And what is the most challenge for women's football fan engagement?
Yeah, so there certainly are differences, and there's been different research projects done on this over the last few years. I think one of the main misconceptions actually of women's football is that it's only women watching women's football. Actually, it's still majority men. It's just less so than in men's football. And actually, we're seeing more of a kind of 50-50 split, where we have a 50-50 gender split, but also more families and younger people tend to be watching women's football, which provides such huge opportunities, particularly from a sponsorship and commercial angle, to be able to, talk and engage with those sponsors and partners because of the difference in the fandom and the customers that we have in women's football. So there are definitely differences, but that said, we also need to remember that football is football. We talk a lot about this when I do different lecturing, and in terms of, we even call it women's football as part of the lecture. And actually, it should just be really, it's football. It is that sport. But what's really important is that we don't compare women's football to men's football in the same way. We're at totally different stages of development and growth. And I think that's really important to remember as well. So key differences for sure, those that actually I think really benefit women's football, which is why for me this is the most exciting area of football, and opportunity develop, bar none.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting you talk about the focus on creating that safe space for families. I did some work with some teams that were analyzing how do we attract more families into the fan zones, or how do we make it match day more interesting. So there is definitely a shift as to how we can use different methods and processes and to make that space more engaging for the families. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And because of course our time for our leisure time, that competition for our leisure time is even more important now. And sport and football isn't just competing against other clubs, it's competing against other sports, it's competing against other things that we do on a daily basis, whether that's going to a restaurant, going to the cinema, going to a shopping mall. This is all part of competition for our leisure time. So that's why football and sport needs to up its game, certainly around the experience side of things.
Okay, so a couple more questions here from Hakali. Sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Thanks for your question. For a country with a young women's league, what would you recommend as the areas to prioritize first?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It'd be interesting to see which country you're particularly talking about, they were referencing to. But I think in terms of growing clubs and that growth, I think a key thing is sustainability. We've seen examples of leagues where they've started before and then only lasted maybe 1 or 2 years because suddenly the clubs can't afford to invest anymore. So it's got to be done slowly, it's got to be done gradually, it's got to be done sustainably. So hence why I would say fan engagement and ensuring that the core and the center of your strategy is all around how do we win new fans to this club or to this league. When we've done that, how do we learn more about them? How do we constantly connect and engage with them? How do we monetize from them? How do we build loyalty? And it's all that engagement model that I outlined there in the presentation to ensure that that's a regular process. It's never ending, it's consistent. And so by building that, you build a sustainable club or you build a sustainable league. And that's the best way to go. I certainly think engagement and experience is a key first step.
Great tips. So thanks for that question. If you can, let us know which country you're from. It'd be great to know because it'd be good to give it some context. Another question here from Ziga. Since women participation in sport is rising in many sports, are you collaborating with other sports to share knowledge and provide support to each other?
Yeah, really great question as well. And yes, there is some examples of really great collaboration actually. And from my experience of working both in men's sport and then women's sport, we tend to see more collaboration across the women's game for sure. So there's been some really good stuff done with the English FA and women's netball in England, for example. Same actually with hockey, and generally the players all do really support each other. So when I was at Tottenham, for example, big Spurs fan is Helen Richardson Walsh. She came and supported the Spurs ladies team, women's team at that time as well, and was a real key part that we used to actually, generate new fans through social media, and could sort of cross over into different popular women's sports as well. So yes, there's lots of great collaboration, and I would definitely recommend that. And we tend to do that better in the women's game.
Great. So thanks for that, Ziga. Question here from Bethany Hushon. Well said, Nicole. Great example of a club is Everton FC. That's why they are known as the People's Club and very community-led. Yeah.
Yeah, Everton do some fantastic things, and again, I think we'll see more of them as they've moved into their new stadium for the next season and beyond. And actually, what will be a real key focus for them now is about that, ensuring that experience at that stadium is the best it can possibly be. Sometimes when clubs are in a facility that they don't own, it can be quite difficult because obviously they then don't have control over everything. But by moving into a stadium where they have that control, I would expect to see even more and better things as well from Everton as they grow. And Everton have had a really great period of growth and sustainable growth as well in the women's game, and full credit to them for building, not just on the pitch but off the pitch in terms of their kind of strategic piece and how they work very, very closely with Everton Football Club as a whole.
Great. Thanks for that, Bethany. So a question here from Anna Costa. Which would be the perfect toolkit for a club to collect women football fans' data?
Well, there's a number of different, obviously, ways to collect data. I mean, one of the key areas that probably needs to improve across many different leagues is actually the data collection around ticket purchasing. So we're starting to move away from it a little bit, maybe in the women's game here in England, but actually it tends to still be tickets are sold on the day at the turnstile, at the gate, where it's then traditionally very difficult to collect that data. So a great way of trying to collect data and understand more about the fans is actually pushing and encouraging, incentivizing even these fans to go and purchase tickets online, because the moment you can capture their data, you then can communicate and engage with them, learn more about them, and then that engagement model starts. So I think that's a really key part of the toolkit. Also, I would say that a toolkit really is going to be around that fan engagement or fan relationship management model that I talked about, in terms of being able to have a system where you collect these email addresses, you collect the data, you are constantly refining that process and understanding more about them. There's nothing worse than if you're signed up to something, because you've purchased something, and then you really don't want to hear from them again, and you're constantly being bombarded with emails. You need to understand what's the right message, what's at the right time, and the right channel. So that's having that fan relationship management model and tool in place can allow you to learn more and more about that for fans. So there's a number of different ways, and different tools that you can use to really kind of build those fans, particularly around women's football. But of course, it's also the same for the men's game. There's no real difference there.
We've got so many technology solutions now that can help us with that. There's a really incredible mix of tools that can build it. Look, we've kind of run over our time a little bit today. I want to say thank you all for your questions. I know there's a couple more still in the chat there that we will get to. What we'll ask is that we'll copy these out and then we'll put them up on a forum so that we can continue the discussion. So I really want to say thank you all for joining this really important discussion. Also, thanks for joining us for our first in our Women in Sports series. It was great to have Nicole lead us out on that today, on a really important topic and a really encouraging topic. I want to say thank you for all the insights. As always, I say when we host these presentations, the amount I learn is fantastic. So I'm really grateful for that. I've got some great takeaways and lots of notes here that I'm going to certainly hopefully take into what I'm doing in day to day. So I really want to say thank you, Nicole.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. Been great. And yeah, I look forward to continue answering the questions in the forum.
Great stuff. Okay, so everybody, thanks again so much for joining us. Sorry we couldn't get to to answer all the questions today, but they will be available on sportworker.com on the forum for this talk, which will come out in the next couple of days. So we'll make sure you get those answers to those questions. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you from all around the world, and I wish you all a very safe and a best afternoon for wherever you are on the planet. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again, Nicole.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye for now.